Well, good morning, church. My name is Michael, and I am one of the pastors here. I want to thank you all for joining us today, whether it's in person or if it's online. Today's message is actually the last message of our summer series, Games People Play. And throughout this series, we've used well-known and beloved games to teach biblical truths. And we started with the game of Fruit Ninja, where we learned about generosity. And Telephone taught us about the dangers of gossip. BS, or bologna sandwich, taught us about building a solid foundation on evidence-based faith. Last week, Rod and his daughter Lucy used the game of life to highlight the difficulties of adulting while developing priorities that honor God. And throughout this series, we've invited some of our non-pastoral leaders to come and share some wisdom with us. We've been blessed to learn from some incredible people like Ian Dalton, Mike Garwood, Joey Woodmansey, and Lucy Pepping. Yeah. But this week, I have the honor of introducing my favorite leader in this entire church. No, Rod, it's not you. Please welcome my beloved wife, Leanne Baggett.
Good morning, church. You just met my husband, Michael. My name is Leanne, and I'd love to tell you a little bit about myself. I really enjoy sewing. I'm part of the quilting ministry here. And if you're interested, come join us. We're going to start back up in September. And I love to homeschool. I have 3 young ones at home, and we homeschool them. So let's take a look and let's meet them. So this is my family. Our oldest, her name is Eris, and she lives in Arizona with her mom. Shout out to Glendale. Good morning, Glendale. Glendale, you are my people because I actually was born and raised in Arizona. But Las Vegas, you're my people too because you're my home now. So, then the next one we have is Ellie. Ellie is 11, and she is going into middle school, and she is probably the most excited middle schooler ever. She's so excited to be starting middle school. You're welcome, Pastor Mike, wherever you are. The next one is Isla. Isla's in the front with the jean jacket, and she is our sweet, shy, just very thoughtful kiddo. And then last but not least is our only son, Orion, and he's 7, and he is our wild child. He's our little crazy one. So today I get to speak to you about the game of perfection. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's a game where the board gets pushed down and a timer is set. And in the middle of the board, there's like shapes cut out, and you have to find the right pieces to get into those shapes in time before the timer runs out. Because if the timer runs out, that board will pop open and pieces will fly everywhere. It should have been named anxiety. So I shared with you that picture perfect family, right? But my family is all but perfect. Nobody is perfect. If nobody is perfect, why do we keep trying to pretend that we are? Like in our social media posts, we might want to make sure we take just the right photo with the right lighting at the best angle so we just look our best, most flattering, right? Or maybe we're striving for perfection in the cleanliness of our house. Maybe we're trying to strive for perfection in the way that our children behave. Maybe we want to make sure that we have the most current hairstyles or the trending clothes so that we seem perfect. Maybe it's at work. You want to be perfect at work so that you get the promotion first or that raise that everyone's trying for. For me, I struggle with this idea of needing to have a perfectly clean house. I get this anxious feeling inside of me when I know that someone is coming over, but my house is not clean enough. So I have to make sure I clean it before anyone comes. But to my standard of clean, because my family standard of clean is very different from my standard of clean, right? Some of you might be able to understand that. I have this very dear friend. She keeps an immaculate house. It is so tidy all the time. And she's raising young kids. I don't know how she does it. I, for the longest time, would not invite her over to my house because of my shame in my inability to keep a tidy house. Who am I trying to impress? Why am I trying to appear to live a perfect life with a perfectly clean house? Today, we're going to spend some time in Matthew chapter 5. So if you have a Bible and you want to pull it out, please feel free to. If you don't have a Bible, there should be some in the seats in front of you. Please take that Bible. It's yours. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 48, it says, "But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Okay, that verse seems pretty straightforward, but I feel that anxiety creeping in. I am to be perfect. I don't know how to be perfect. I'm just trying to get through life, raise some kids without letting them get hurt, trying to make sure that I'm not angry with them when they're doing something really silly. How am I supposed to live a perfect life? I feel that anxiety. I don't know how to live perfectly, but I do know that God did not intend for me to read one Bible verse at a time without context. It's kind of like when you're having a conversation with someone and you're in the middle of this conversation, but somebody else joins the conversation and they have no context for what you're talking about. Then they just add what they think makes sense to the story, but it can be really awkward and it may not even be on point to what you and your original person the conversation was. That's kind of what it's like when we read one Bible verse at a time. That is not how God intended for us to read the Bible. We need some context. So to truly understand what God is trying to tell us here in Matthew chapter 5, we would need to go back all the way to the beginning. I'm not going to do that today, but I would like to encourage you to take some time this week and read Matthew chapter 5 at home. Starting in verse 1 of Matthew 5, Jesus is giving his famous sermon, the Sermon on the Mount. And from the beginning, we realize it isn't so easy to be perfect. What Jesus is saying is that in order to be perfect, we would need to live our lives to the letter of the law. So we might think about the 10 commandments, right? Do not kill. Okay, that's an easy one. Do not commit adultery. All right, I got this. Okay, so if I just focus on keeping the commandments that are easy for me, maybe this perfect thing isn't so hard after all. But Jesus. In verse 21, Jesus says, "You have heard that our ancestors were told, 'You must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment.' But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell." Later on, he says in verse 27, "You have heard the commandment that says, 'You must not commit adultery.' But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Ooh, all right. So Jesus is teaching the crowds God's standard of perfection. Then we realize we're always going to fall short. So I can't even be angry at my kids anymore without sinning. I can't even look at Captain America anymore. at that time, the crowds likely reacted the way that many of us are reacting today. Maybe you're like me and you're struggling to keep some of those commandments, those simple rules, before Jesus came along and made them even harder. I'm already failing, and now it's getting more difficult? Why do I even try at all? Years after Jesus was talking to the crowds, things became much clearer, and the writer of Hebrews describes this very well. Under the old covenant, the priest stands and ministers before the altar day after day, offering the same sacrifices again and again, which can never take away sins. But our high priest offered himself to God as a single sacrifice for sins, good for all time. Then he sat down in the place of honor at God's right hand. There he waits until his enemies are humbled and made a footstool under his feet. For by that one offering, he forever made perfect those who are being made holy. I want to say that again. He forever made perfect those who are being made holy. His perfection is substituted for our imperfection. And we are made perfect because of Jesus. I can already feel my anxiety subsiding. But if we can't be perfect, how should we live? Church, we need to be authentic rather than perfect. In the Bible, the Pharisees, who were the religious leaders of the time, were always striving for perfection by making sure that they were living their lives to the letter of the law. In Luke 11, as Jesus was speaking, one of the Pharisees invited him home for a meal. So he went in and took his place at the table. His host was amazed to see that he sat down to eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. Then the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools! Didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you will be clean all over." In truth, the Pharisees didn't want to be perfect. They just wanted to appear like they were perfect. And what's funny is that the ceremony of the washing of the hands was not a law. It was merely tradition. Is that what we want? We just want others to think that we're perfect? I'm cleaning my house so that people think I have a perfectly clean house? We're making sure that those social media pictures are just right, only showing the perfect and the good. We're making sure that our children's behavior is right on, not misbehaving. We're making sure that we're doing the best at work and always striving for perfection so that we can get the raise. In 2 Corinthians 2:9, Jesus says, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." Now, in true mom fashion, I looked up the children's version of this verse, and I really liked the way that it was written. It says, "My grace is all you need. My power is strongest when you are weak." That means I need to own my brokenness. I have to be real. This scripture for me means I need to be authentic. I had a moment early on in my parenting journey when I realized that my 2-year-old little girl didn't even know what a lie was. She didn't even realize that a lie was a possibility. And in that moment, I just never wanted that sweet baby girl to ever tell a lie. But I also realized that this is not realistic. This is unrealistic. So I thought, As her parent, how could I guide her to want to be truthful? Then I realized kids lie because they don't want to get in trouble. They lie because they feel shame and guilt. How many times do we hide our true selves because of shame, guilt, or even fear of judgment? Probably more than we would like to admit. So I decided right then and there that my kids' consequences would not be as severe if they were being truthful with me. I needed to allow them to speak truth without fear of repercussions. My kids are now 11, 9, and 7, and I find that more often than not always, but more often than not, they will come to me to admit their wrongdoings before I've even realized what has happened. I always thank them for being honest, and I make sure that I have a conversation about what their consequence would have been, how much more severe it would have been had they tried to lie and hide it from me. My hope is that my kids are learning to be authentic, even in their brokenness. We need to strive for authenticity, not for perfection. We can't sacrifice our authenticity for other people's approval. How much more approachable are we if we are authentic instead of hiding behind this image of perfection? Maybe if we own who we are completely, even our brokenness, we can reflect God's perfection. Now, I do want to clarify that this is not our get out of jail free pass, just to resign ourselves to the fact that, well, I can't achieve perfection, so why should I even try? Remember, if we call ourselves Christians, that means we are being sanctified, or we are being made holy by the power of the Holy Spirit within us. We are a reflection of God, and we might just be the only encounter a non-believer has with Jesus. Be authentic, but don't be afraid to share who the perfect one is and how he has changed your life. Don't stop yourself from trying for fear of not being perfect. As I was preparing for this message, I kept saying, I can't do this, I can't do this. I would tell my husband, I don't think I can do this. And he would laugh at me, and he'd say, why? Because it's not perfect? Oh my goodness. But in all honesty, I really needed to hear that. It lightened the mood, and it reminded me that I could still try, even though I am not perfect. Michael was supporting me and encouraging me throughout this entire process. And that's when I realized, I think I found myself a cheerleader. So, church, looking back at Matthew 5:48, we have a decision to make. We can try to earn our salvation by living a perfect life without sin, but that means we cannot sin. Or we can allow Jesus to be perfection for us. As for me, I'm going to choose Jesus. If this Jesus thing is still new for you, or you're not so sure about him, that's okay. I'm really glad you're here today. Grab one of those connection cards that Rod was talking about in the seat in front of you. Fill your information out and just say, I have questions. Someone will reach out to you this week. Or you can come find me after service, and I would be glad to point you in the right direction. I realize I'm never going to be completely perfect, but I can try to be authentic. And if you want to choose Jesus too, here are some ways that can help us live authentically. I want you all to take a moment and identify your false perfection and name it. That's our first step. We're going to name it. Church, I'm naming mine right here today. I struggle with the idea of needing a perfectly clean house. Now, I'm not telling you to stand up here and tell everyone your false perfections, but find a trusted friend. Go to them and name your false perfection. Maybe the next time someone asks if you're doing okay, you tell them the truth. You don't have to spill your guts, but it's okay to say, I'm not doing so great right now, but I really don't want to talk about it. Sometimes when I hear people say, I'm great, or it's just another beautiful day, I know that they might not be telling me the truth. It's okay to admit that you're not okay. And if you ask someone how they are doing and they say that they are struggling, you don't have to have the answers. Just be there. Be present and listen. So it's important to name because the first step to learning and growing is naming. If you think about a baby, the adults in their world name everything for them. Mama, dada, colors, shapes. Or maybe think about the first job that you ever had. Your boss likely had to walk you around the facility and name things for you so that you understood how it worked. My next step, own it. I have since had the conversation with my friend, the friend with the perfectly clean house. It took me over a year to even invite her to my house because of the shame that I was feeling in my inability to keep a tidy house like she could. She could do it. But I needed to own it. I told her about my insecurities and why it took me so long to invite her over. Her response to my confession is something I will always remember. She said, "Oh, Leanne, I don't ever expect anyone to live up to my standard of clean." And that's when it hit me, church. I'm putting that shame on myself all by myself. How much time did I miss out in that friendship because my inability to be authentic with her? My next step, work on it. This is going to look different for every situation. In marriage, it's okay to say that things aren't going so well. There is no such thing as a perfect marriage. You can ask for help. We have amazing resources in the pastors here at Mosaic, and I know that any one of them would be happy to sit down with you and your spouse to talk about things. On social media, let's start with asking ourselves, is this really my authentic self? Or is this just what I want everyone to think about me? If it's not authentic, I urge you to reconsider posting it. And ask a trusted friend to help hold you accountable for your posts. If you have a messy house like me, I've learned I need to stop apologizing for a lived-in house. My priority has to be my relationship with Jesus. And it can't be with making sure I have a perfectly clean house all the time. It's not going to happen at my house. I say this next one for myself. Our children are not perfect beings. We cannot expect them to be, so we need to offer them some grace when they inevitably fail. My goal for myself is to meet my kids with mercy rather than shame, guilt, or judgment. Church, you've heard it said here so many times before, and I think that it's said so often because the pastors here just want what's best for us since we are a family. Plug into a small group. If you're not plugged into one, I really encourage you to. Go talk to Pastor Greg. He's going to be out in the lobby. He's ready to talk to you about this. He will get you plugged into the right one. If you're in Glendale, go talk to Pastor Tim. He's going to get you connected. You will be blessed by being in a small group. Share your struggles with them. They are going to love you through it. I speak from experience. You can also give the 180 a try. If you're new here and you're not sure what that is, the 180 is our recovery ministry here at Mosaic for all struggles. My last step is pray over it. Give it up to God. Trying to achieve perfection will always give us anxiety. Who are we trying to impress with this facade of perfection? God? I'm pretty sure God knows all of my filth already. He sees me. He knows me. And he still calls me his daughter. What a friend we have in Jesus. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." Church, perfection is a salvation requirement, but we cannot reach that perfection without Jesus. Can you feel that anxiety dissolve? I know I can. Today, as you leave, there will be people at the doors at the back ready to hand you a perfection game piece. Please take one. I'd love for you to set it up at your house somewhere, but don't clean it up. Put it somewhere that it can be a daily reminder for you, for all of us, that we need to live authentically and not try to achieve perfection. Let's stop playing this game of perfection and start living authentically. Let's pray.